All right, everybody, welcome to the Brownie Points podcast. We finally have some actual, real football to talk about this week. We're really excited to get into it. First, we're going to start off with the offense. We're going to talk a little bit about Deshaun Watson. We're going to get into some Nick Chubb, Dawand Jones, talk about how they did as a whole. Then we're going to have a segment. We're going to talk about the defense. We're going to talk about Jim Schwartz, his impact on the defensive philosophy as a whole, as well as the standout players. And we're also going to get into the Brownie Points segment, the namesake of this podcast. This format looks like 1, 2, and 3 points that we're going to give out on the offense, 1, 2, and 3 points to players on the defense. So there's going to be 6 players in total getting our brownie points, so to speak. So kick it right off. Let's start off with Deshaun Watson. He's the quarterback. He's the one everybody wants to know about. What were your impressions of Deshaun Watson from this game?
Well, Deshaun, as I've tried to warn some people in my life before the podcast started, he has struggled in weather throughout his career. So that is something that he's going to have to get used to. Coming from Clemson, playing in Houston, even Indianapolis Colts in their division, play indoors. He's going to have to get used to that. So you should expect a bit of a learning curve coming in the weather. And I do think you saw in the second half when the weather let up a bit, he definitely played better.
Yeah.
So that was encouraging. His throws, again, like obviously everybody knows just by watching the game at all, if you have any brain, the first half was really, really bad.
Yeah.
Second half was all right. And he even had a couple good throws. I'd say one was actually a good throw where it goes over a defender's hand, and that was actually well placed. That felt good.
That was a great throw.
One of them was good, whereas then it went downfield, but he was open. But it was downfield, so it was a nice throw, and it went where it needed to, and it had some velocity on it. And it didn't skip in there, like some of the ones in the first half.
Exactly.
The rest of the time, he kind of made some throws that he needed to make, but he didn't miss a lot of easy ones like he was in the first half. Big improvement.
Yeah.
You feel a lot better about the second half, obviously. You hope it's really just a weather thing he needs to get over. The big concern I had watching the game was his processing. I felt his processing was a little lackluster. I didn't really see him go read to read and then make the right read.
Yeah.
And some of his throws weren't just that he missed guys, it was that he was late on the throw. And that was a problem last year, too. So I need to see him make reads a little quicker. A lot of football, what makes it so hard to play quarterback, isn't just the arm talent. It's being able to read the play and make the play in anticipation.
Yeah.
And he wasn't anticipating yesterday. So I need to see more of that. But again, it's still early, still getting back into form. So hopefully that comes along. That was my thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, coming into this game, we basically waited 2 years for this moment, essentially, right? Because we got Deshaun Watson, then he was suspended, then he came back, and we all knew he wasn't going to be Deshaun Watson for those 6 games. We just knew it. We knew it was going to be next year. That's really what we were waiting for. And it's exactly what happened. He wasn't that great. We waited the whole offseason. It feels like we basically waited 2 years for this moment. And it feels like we kind of have to postpone our judgment again, because there's 2 main reasons why we can't really judge this week. We have the rain, which obviously affects things. Affects his ability to throw. It affects the defense. It affects everything. And then also it's week 1. And there's always oddball stuff that goes on in the NFL in week 1. It's not going to happen to every team. But every year there's always one team that performs nothing like who they really are in week 1. There's usually a team that either does better than they are for the rest of the year or does worse than they do for the rest of the year. Yes, sometimes more. But I don't recall a time when there wasn't at least one. So like week 1, you never really usually want to put too much stock into it, but the fact that it was also the rain made it so tried and so many of those throws, you try to talk about his processing. So like you're definitely trying to find those areas that aren't necessarily affected by the rain, but at the same time, it looked like the Bengals were playing some zone, and Cooper, they were trying to find those pockets of space, and then just missed them. Just straight up missed them, and those were so frustrating to watch. It did seem like he picked up a little bit in the second half, which is good. But that's partly because the weather dropped down. And that is a bit of a concern, though, because for as much as we don't want to judge what's overall a poor performance from him, as much as we don't want to judge because of the rain, I feel like we should judge somewhat because it's Cleveland. There's going to be rain. You're going to play in at least one game a year where you're dealing with bad weather. So he's got to figure something out. Maybe he needs gloves to change out every possession. I don't know, whatever, right? He's got to figure something else. I would have liked to see a little bit more from him, but I think all things considered, it still has been a long time for him. He still may need some more time. And then the rain, and he might need some more time to adjust to the rain. So all things considered, I'm not putting too much stock into it, although I think we can all agree it was generally unimpressive performance, though, outside of his feet, because he did look great on his feet.
Great on his feet. To add a little bit more, you're saying about what he's going to need to play in the weather in Cleveland.
Yeah.
You do want to add to that we're hoping to be in the playoff. Mm-hmm. Come playoff time, the weather's bad, and you're not always going to play indoors.
Especially here.
Especially if you're good enough to be the home team, which we want. Well, the weather's going to be bad. So
yes,
definitely does need to improve in that area, and we'll have to see how that goes.
Yeah.
Like, you have hope.
Yeah.
There's no reason to freak out just yet. There were good moments. There were bad moments. Athleticism, he's athletic. Obviously, he's super athletic. So, yeah, I mean, you're just going to hope that he starts to read a little bit better. And when you watch the really good quarterbacks, they anticipate, right? They're really throwing balls when the player's starting to make their cuts, and they read the defender. And the way the defenders are placed, they'll know that they're going to get open and start the throw then. So that's something that can actually take a little while to get back into form on.
Yeah.
So I'm not terribly surprised his processing is a bit slow in that area.
Yeah. All right, getting into the other standout players from the offense that we noticed, let's talk about Nick Chubb. I think Nick Chubb was the standout player from the game overall. I think he was the clear man of the match.
Yeah, there's not a lot to add to that. It was Nick Chubb doing Nick Chubb things. Exactly. If he was a rookie, we'd be all over the place because he'd be the new thing. And maybe it's unfair, but he's been Chubb for a while, and he continues to be Nick Chubb, and he continues to find ways to make plays. Mm-hmm. Referring to the running backs, though, Jacoby Ford was pretty disappointing.
Not Jacoby Ford, Jerome Ford.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Jerome Ford was pretty disappointing. Mm-hmm. He didn't get very many yards on the carries he got, and he had that fumble. So that's not a great start. He's essentially a rookie, right? It's his first year. It's first time really getting any NFL snaps.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be too harsh, but it was a poor showing.
Especially because the team invested in him.
Yeah.
They let Demetric Felton go. They let some of that depth go. Essentially saying, hey, we believe in you, so he better be good, or we're a little bit screwed when it comes to depth. Not a little bit, I would say a lot screwed. Yeah, so Nick Chubb, as we said, he was his regular efficient self. 18 carries, 106 yards, almost 6 yards pop, so he was super efficient in the game. It's exactly what you want for him. He gave them exactly what they needed in that weather. So props to Nick Chubb. We're going to talk about him a little bit later in the Brownie Point segment. Getting into Dawand Jones, because Jack Conklin, once again, fulfilled his yearly prophecy. Him and Jacob Phillips must be really good buddies right now.
Best in good buddies.
I don't know if you saw the news. Earlier today, it came out. I think he tore his ACL and his MCL. He's out for the season. He's done. He's not coming back this year. And Dawand Jones was pretty much thrown into the fire. And to be honest, I felt like he did really well. When I was watching that game, I was paying really close attention to Dawand Jones. This was something I touched on before. I was wondering about the depth of the Browns because it felt like, we weren't sure. He's now going to have to come in, so he better be good. And from that game, I felt like he was. I felt like he did a great job holding his blocks. I didn't see anybody getting past him. Every guy that came into them, he was able to hold strong, and he also didn't give ground to, as opposed to Jedrick Wills, for example. On a few of those plays, he didn't do so, astronomically terrible. But a lot of plays you watch when he's getting up into his blocks, you could see he's getting pushed back a little bit. He's struggling out there. He's ultimately... didn't get completely burned, but he was struggling a little bit out there, whereas Dawand Jones was holding a lot more firm. And I thought he also did a really good job in the pass block, where right off that snap, you got to take 3 quick steps back, sometimes 5, whatever, depending on the technique. But really good job taking those steps back and setting himself up to be in a great position to get that block. And then once he's there, he's 6'8", 370 pounds. Nobody was able to get
Do you know he played basketball in high school?
Dawand Jones?
Yeah.
For real?
Yeah. I just want to throw that in there because you're talking about
370 pounds?
Yeah.
So that could... Okay.
Well, he might have been slightly less in high school, but
that
more
could
or
explain
less.
his footwork, yeah.
That's what I was talking about, his footwork, yeah.
Yeah, because I thought he had pretty good feet, especially for a guy that's
he does.
6'8". So I was very impressed with him. I'm not saying he was a world beater, but I thought he was very solid in that game, and we're going to look to see what he does in the future. But the Bengals have a decent pass rush, so I think it was a decent test.
I think it was a great building block. You got to love it because guys in the preseason will show up, don't always show up in the regular season. And he is a guy who struggled with technique at Ohio State at times. So I had great hopes for him for the future. Mm-hmm. But for him to come in week 1
Bill Callahan
and play well, that was really great to see. Made me feel much better. I'm glad they gave him so many preseason snaps. Boy, did that pay off. And yeah, to see him never really have a play where he just got smoked is great.
Which is typical.
What he's got to watch out for is week 2, because when they know to prepare for him, because this week they were still preparing for Conklin, teams will try some stunts and twists to confuse him.
Yeah.
So it'll be probably a little tougher in some ways in week 2, but overall, you can't be mad. I mean, you got to be so excited to see him come out there and play like that. We're excited. I mean, he's a freak of nature, so if he starts getting some technique down, you got to be excited. He's huge, and he's got great feet. So if he can figure out technique, sky's the limit.
Certainly a tools guy. You got to give your props to Bill Callahan, who's done a great job with offensive linemen. He's typically done a great job with the Browns. I mean, he's, from what I understand, is generally considered maybe the most respected offensive line coach in the NFL right now. So glad the Browns have him. Looks like he did a good job with Dawand Jones. Good job drafted him. Looks like he's a decent player, at least based off of this week. We don't want to put too much stock into it because, like you said, once you start planning for a guy and scheming for a guy, it's a whole other ballgame. We see that in every position. And most offensive linemen will get smoked. At one point or another, you're going to have a play where you just missed your assignment. You didn't do your play right. You're not in the right spot, and a guy blows right by you. You're going to have those plays where a veteran guy takes advantage of you. I think next week we need to be prepared for that. I think be prepared for him to get smoked a couple times and try to look at his overall performance, and hopefully he can continue to improve. But this could be the high point for the next couple weeks. So closing out that segment, and let's move into the defense. Let's talk about Jim Schwartz, the impact that he's brought to this team seemingly immediately. Again, it's difficult to evaluate because, again, the rain impacts the whole game. Obviously, the Bengals offense is somewhat handicapped by the rain, which means the defense knows they're going to be doing certain things. No, they're not going to be doing certain other things that allow them to play in a certain way. But that Jim Schwartz attacking style looked really good on the Browns with excellent man-to-man corners with Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome locking up their guys, doing their role. The defensive line wreaking havoc, really, as a unit. I don't want to say wreaking havoc, but they did a really strong, solid job as a unit. So I think the impact that Jim Schwartz brought was really felt. And I think it was very apparent when you watched that game, and I was very impressed with him.
Yeah, what I thought was the clearest advantage with this defense. Number one, the defensive tackles didn't disappear, which is great, of course.
Yes.
But honestly, I think it was the Jim Schwartz effect, because what was clear to me is the discipline from the defense. So often in the past, we have seen teams get the edge because we do not keep contained on the defense because there isn't discipline.
Yeah.
Discipline holds players in check and makes sure they don't always get the edge. It makes sure that you don't just fall apart when you have a good pass rush going and the quarterback just dashes up for 15 yards easily and converts another 3rd and long because we lose contain. Gap, discipline, these things matter. JOK had a great tackle for a loss because we were holding up at the line of scrimmage and he could do what he does best.
Yeah.
So that was really, really good to see. Obviously, you're right. I mean, the weather does play into this, obviously, somewhat. In week 1, you do wonder a little bit. But it felt like team defense. It didn't feel like there weren't a bunch of lucky picks. There weren't a bunch of lucky plays.
Yeah.
It just felt like a good team effort, and they knew what they were doing, and they did what they were supposed to do, and they were where they were supposed to be. And as such, everything worked out. And, of course, again, the one big talent upgrade being at defensive tackle, and I thought they were much stouter at the line. It doesn't come up in big stat lines. When you watch the game, they're much more stout at that point. There were only a couple runs that broke out, and the rest of the game, we were able to hold them. So that's obviously a big deal.
All right, so enough about the defense. And it's finally time for us to get into the Brownie Point segment. I've been waiting for us to get into this for weeks. I've been waiting. We named the podcast partly in part for this segment. We're going to give out our grades. Not our grades, but this is our version of giving out grades. We're going to give out 3 points to one player, 2 points to another, 1 point to another player. And we're going to do that for the offense, and we're going to do that for the defense. Let's start off with the offense. We're both in agreement for our 3 brownie points, which is going to
Nick Chubb.
Nick Chubb. Yeah, big surprise. Whoopee. Okay. Do you want to add any thoughts to that, or?
Just, the guy's a rock. He's been a rock. I do want to add that there was something even more impressive about this game as opposed to even some of his games where he's had 150 yards. Because it's downpour raining, your quarterback's playing terrible. They know you are wanting to run. They know you want to run, and he still ran and made big plays. There was something extra impressive about that. And there's something, that's what really separates him from other backs. It's when they know you want to run and they are trying to add those people into the box to stop you and you still get those runs. That's why Nick Chubb's Nick Chubb.
Yeah, absolutely. And that shows up in all across the board. And every way you look at Nick Chubb, he does really well in fourth quarters. He does really well after contact. He does really well in those positions where the defense knows he's going to be there. And even gets to him, and he still has a way of producing at that Nick Chubb level. That's what we love so much about him, right? But I think that was pretty clear. We all knew it was going to be Nick Chubb for 3 points.
Chubb, yeah.
But 2 points. 2 gets you 2 Brownie points.
2 points is that nice move by Andrew Berry at the end of the season to finally give up on his ill-fated 4th-round pick. Dustin Hopkins! He gets 2 points, and he gets 2 points because he hit 3 field goals. He hit his extra points. Mm-hmm. He's the kind of kicker you need. He's the kind of kicker we love. A guy who hits 45 yards and in at a consistent basis.
Exactly.
Don't need the guy who's going to hit 55 yards. It's nice. What you need is the guy who hits 45 and in at a consistent level so that you can stack up possessions and force the other team into that position where they have to throw the ball, where they have to do more. And you can just consistently stack them up. And the worst thing is when you make that decision, go for the field goal, and they miss. And it's the worst.
Could not agree more.
It hurts them momentum. It gives them good field position. You haven't put up that extra point. It's the worst. To have a guy who did it consistently is great. It was bad weather, too, for him. It's hard to kick in that weather. He kicked perfectly, got everything done. Really wasn't even that moment where it looked like it was going to miss.
No.
He just kicked well. And that was just nice to see. And real relief for Browns fans, considering the roller coaster kicker we've had the last few years.
It really factors a lot into the head coach decision making. So often when you're inside your own 40, inside your own 50, you're making these decisions about what play should we run, should we go for the touchdown? Should we, be a little bit more conservative and just take our field goal? But if you're not even sure if your kicker can hit those field goals, that puts you in a much more tricky situation. And like you said, it's even worse when you make the right move even, right? And you make that slightly more conservative decision to take your points. Because then you get double hit. Because not only did you not go for the touchdown, and you lose out on those potential 7 points, they don't even get the 3. So it's like a double whammy. It's really bad. So having Dustin Hopkins hit those 45 yards in the rain was awesome. Who's your...
And a quick note, I want to give Barry some credit because he's much maligned for the pick of Cade York, and he deserves it. But moving on from picks, like we said, he moved on. He realized right before the season, he said, no, I can't do this again. I do need to move on. Got a solid guy. So give him some kudos for fixing the mistake.
Yeah.
But moving on, sorry.
No, absolutely. And so who's your pick? So we got our 3 points went to Nick Chubb. 2 points we both agreed went to Dustin Hopkins. I believe this is where we had our disagreement when we talked pre-show. What did you want to add?
So I actually gave 1 star to Deshaun. I didn't think he had the world's best game. I think the receivers are basically get a pass. You can't really judge them based on what went on. They just kind of are whatever, not knocking them, not giving them props, just not sure.
Yeah.
So Deshaun gets it because...
nobody had more than 40 yards. So it's not...
Yeah, he did step up in the second half. He did make some plays to make sure we put the game away. He ran for a touchdown. He made some nice plays on the ground. And for those reasons, I'll give him 1 star and hope for better in future weeks.
Yeah. For me, I don't think that was a bad pick at all. For me, I wanted to give it to Dawand Jones. I considered Deshaun Watson, of course, obviously he's a quarterback. I ultimately felt like those misses and those inaccuracies, they hurt me too much to watch. I just couldn't give it to him. And I also wanted to give an extra shout out to Dawand Jones because I really was impressed with him and his ability to step in for Jack Conklin. He's not stepping in for any old right tackle. He's stepping in for an all-pro right tackle. And for him to be thrown into the fire like that week 1 as a rookie when you have an all-pro ahead of you, you're not expecting to get exactly a ton of starting reps at the right tackle position. To be thrown into that fire that early, there was a lot of potential for him to get absolutely burned in a game when the other team is going to be stacking the D-line, knowing that you're probably going to have to run more. You're in a position where you know you're probably going to be blocking a lot. And I was really nervous that he was going to get burned and it was going to mess up those drives, because you tend to have less room for error when you're dealing with these rainy games. And I thought, those couple mistakes could really cost the team in those crucial moments. They're not going to have that space in order to make up for the mistakes, but he didn't really make the mistakes. I didn't see him get burned at all. And I just felt like he needed to be commended for that. I felt like he needed to get that point.
I think it's fair, and I mean, it definitely is, because if your right tackle comes in and looks like James Hudson did when he first came in, you can get burned a few times. They're living in the backfield. It changes the course of the game. So I think it's fair. Just slight disagreement.
Fair enough. Moving into the defense, let's give out our points for the defense.
3 stars goes to Grant Talbot for me. He made some big tackles. He was consistent. He had, I think, the most good plays on defense of anyone today. Most standout plays. He had a couple really nice tackles right by the line of scrimmage. Yeah, I just thought he was really good, and it was nice to see a real standout game from Delpit. Second-round pick from LSU. He's been hanging around for a while. I've kind of been talking about him, but this was, I think, the first game I've really seen him where I thought, Grant Delpit, hello, here you are. Good to see you. So I think he deserved it. He earned it. I think he was the most consistently good defensive player today. Not that anybody else was bad, but I think he made the most standout plays. So Grant Delpit gets the 3 brownie points for me.
Yeah, I think Delpit, of course, did a great job. I didn't have 3 brownie points, but you'll see where I had him later. We've been looking for Grant Delpit to pop in a game for a while. And I felt like this was the first time we really popped. We feel like you really noticed him, or he stood out. He made some great plays. But for me, I ultimately went with Denzel Ward. Even though it was in the rain and you weren't really expecting too much from the Bengals, he still did his job. And I think the corners as a group were excellent in that game. The pass coverage was really phenomenal. And it wasn't just because of the rain. There was a lot of 50-50 balls that our corners did a great job batting away, and everyone got in on that. So Greg Newsome did one of those. MJ Emerson had one of those plays. Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit had that crazy play that went over the back. That got to bat that one away. But Denzel Ward to me feels like the leader of that pass coverage unit. Obviously, of the corners, he's of course the one getting the most attention from Jamar Chase, giving Jamar Chase the most attention. And I wanted to give him his props for that.
Definitely fair enough. Moving on, for 2 brownie points, I'm giving it to Myles Garrett. I think he looked good. He had that one, of course, huge play, which just really put the game out of commission. And he was double teamed. He looked phenomenal.
Moment of brilliance.
But I will say he also kind of looked exactly like I kind of was talking about. He looked like a top 5 defensive end and not a top 2 defensive end, because he did also disappear a lot of the game. He wasn't constantly in the backfield. But when you needed him, no matter who was blocking him, he made the biggest play.
Absolutely.
Which makes him a top 5 defensive end.
Yeah.
But personally, I did notice he disappeared a bit. But hey, when it mattered, he showed up. He still gets 2 because he had that huge play. And he was still good. So he gets 2 from me. Who's your 2 brownie stars?
Yeah, you showed a little bit more cojones on that one. I didn't really feel like there was a huge standout from the defensive line. I went with the cop-out, and I'm giving 2 brownie points to the defensive line. Boo. As a group. I know. I'm really going to try not to do that. I know Myles Garrett had that sack, and so it probably makes the most sense to give that one to him, but like you were saying, for the most of the game, it's not like he was in the backfield the whole time. It didn't feel like anyone was truly a standout. The unit as a whole was really good. It felt like they were kind of working off of each other and getting pressure. When you were watching that game, it's not like we saw 5 or 6 moments of brilliance or 3 moments of brilliance from Myles Garrett. We saw 1 moment of brilliance from Myles Garrett. And to me, that's not enough for you to get that individual standout. I feel like I don't want to give it to him for the sake of having to pick one guy. So I'm going to give it to the D-line as a whole, which I know it's a little bit, I'm trying not to do that, but that's what I'm going to do this week.
Well, you made a good point. I am ashamed of you as a human being, but
I have no honor.
You have no honor, but you made a fair point.
All right. Moving on. 1 brownie point.
1 brownie point. I give this one to Denzel Ward because the weather, I think, affects things. So because of the way the weather affected things, and I felt that I couldn't 100% say what he was and wasn't doing, Jamar Chase was under 40 yards. He gets a certain amount of credit for that. If it was normal weather, I would be touting him 3 brownie points, phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because of the rain, I'm giving him 1. But overall, he was great. I mean, you made good points about him. It's really a weather grade out. That's all. Because based on the statistical output allowed, it was a phenomenal performance. So. Yeah. And we have reason to believe. Definitely you feel very good about the secondary, the way they played, and feeling how, especially with Delpit coming along too, with Juan Thornhill, you're like, hey, you got high hopes for him moving into these next couple of games. If that secondary can stay healthy, you feel really good.
Yeah, for me, what you're saying, again, makes sense. And for the weather, not wanting to put too much stock in it. For me, like I said, I just feel like just because Jamar Chase is such a standout wide receiver, I felt like I just wanted to give him his props. But for me, we don't really disagree too much on that one. And for me, at one brownie point, I had that to Grant Delpit. You had it 3 brownie points for you. Yeah, for me, I'm giving him 1. I do think he popped. I do think he did great overall. I just felt like not quite as much impact as the D-line and then Denzel Ward. But overall, he had a great game, and we already talked about him, so I don't want to rehash that too much. But a great showing from the team overall. The offense overall looked... You can't expect too much from them, so like the passing game... if you told me before that the passing game was weak, the running game was strong, and scored 24 points, and the game was raining the whole time, I would take it. If you told me that they were only going to allow 3 points, even in the rain, I would take it. So I think ultimately you have to be satisfied with both of these. You don't want to put too much in it and get your hopes too high on everybody just because of the rain. But overall, I think you have to be happy with the performances, and I think we're looking forward to next week. Really excited to see what they can do.
Okay, and looking forward, we'll be doing our podcast next week, recapping the Steelers game that's coming up. Real quick, they got destroyed by the Niners. They look terrible. We love to see it.
Absolutely.
We're worried about week 1 mirages. We're hoping there's not a repeat of last year. So let's hope you can read a little better against this defense because they're going to throw some stunts out there. But I look, the Steelers don't look that great. I think Kenny Pickett's overrated. This defense should show up against them. I think that there is substantial evidence that the Browns come out there and play with the win as long as they don't get too heady.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see what happens ultimately next week. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Brownie Points, @BrowniePoints99. Thanks for listening. See you next week.